There is a growing state of cultural emergency across India, and freedom of speech and expression is under greater threat than it has ever been. The government stands accused of not standing up for the right for people to express themselves and for giving in to the mob very easily. This is your right to be heard. This is the Town Hall Show. We've got Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting Manish Tewari on the hot seat. We've got lots of young concerned citizens who are waiting to grill the minister. I want to start with that gentleman holding the mic. He's got the first question for us. Sir,
Mamta bans Rushdie and Joya bans Hassan, and Rajasthan government wants Nandi's head. Is this democracy or Talibanicracy or dictatorship?
Well, that sounds more like a toasting than a grilling, but be that as it may. I think people have a legitimate right to be concerned where they feel that there is some sort of a curb on the freedom of speech and expression. But I think each of these issues needs to be segmented, and they need to be dealt on their own merits and on their own facts and merits. And you cannot really club it all together, under one broad brush. So therefore, insofar as Vishwarupam is concerned, I think you may have noticed that the government of India has gone an extra mile. We've set up a committee under Justice Mukul Mudgal to see as to how the law can be made more efficacious in terms of the fact that once the Central Board of Film Certification certifies a movie to be fit for exhibition, then state governments do not have the powers to really interfere with that certification process. And this is essentially what the Supreme Court had also said in the Prakash Jha matter. Insofar as what the West Bengal Chief Minister does, or what a particular other Chief Minister has done maybe under other circumstances or different circumstances, is a question which they can best answer. What falls to our remit in terms of the jurisdiction or the mandate that we exercise, we have tried to ensure that at least those areas remain absolutely within the ambit of Article 19 in its purest essence, as what the founders of the Constitution wanted it to be.
No, but the law exists on paper. The concern that citizens have is that it's the mob that wins each time. That lady wants to ask a question.
Sir, we have freedom of speech provided we don't offend any group in our country. But India is such a diverse country that we have numerous tribes and numerous castes. So in what way can we convey our message without it being a hate speech?
Somebody or the other is bound to get offended.
Well, I said this yesterday and I'm saying it today, that the freedom of speech and expression includes the right to offend, provided that it is circumscribed by a very robust legal remedy, that if somebody really feels aggrieved by what you've said, he or she has the possibility of accessing the legal system to get what is quote unquote a proper legal redress. So therefore, then the balance is in equilibrium in terms of the fact that you've got your freedom of speech and expression. It must extend to the right to offend. But if somebody really feels offended, then he also has a remedy which he is able to access, and ultimately that gets judicially adjudicated.
Shoma.
Actually, Manish, this is a bit of a cop-out, because the point is that if you're going to create a legal redress under the current set of legislations, even Article 19.2, which is so loosely defined that anybody can create a kind of baggy tent in which to hide in. Certainly all governments hide in the baggy tent of 19.2, which is that we should not create a law and order problem, there shouldn't be sedition, we should have friendly relations with foreign countries, morality and decency. So the fact is that the moment you go to a court, which is typically what happens, there's a ban until the case is heard, where it is something to do with a piece of art, whether it's film, music, cinema, writing, where citizens can exercise choice, whether they go see it or engage with it or not. Shouldn't just their capacity to protest be in the democratic domain, that they protest, as long as it's non-violent, they can protest, but they cannot access the legal system at the drop of a hat, because it really amounts to an infringement. And so this is a cop-out.
Well, I think, Shoma, we've had this debate earlier on in the format of your festival. And I said that the challenge is to really find the golden mean. the golden mean between the right of freedom in expression, which Article 19 guarantees, and its circumscription by Article 19.2. I've read your statements also with regard to the fact that there should be a debate about the terms of Article 19.2. But essentially, you see, in a rule-based society, in a democracy which is governed by the rule of law, judicial adjudication is possibly the best way of determining an issue on which there is contention on either side. So therefore, the Supreme Court over the past 62 years has interpreted each of these terms, and in fact has interpreted it very liberally to read down into the freedom of speech and expression. So I don't think there should really be a concern about judicial adjudication if we believe, and which I believe, that the right to freedom of speech and expression includes the right to offend. Then obviously I think the corresponding remedy must be available, and that corresponding remedy, rather than being available in a mobocracy or on the streets, should really be available and accessible within the conforms of the judicial system.
Just a few days ago, we had Salman Rushdie with us in our studios, and his right to freedom of speech has actually been violated more than anyone else's. I'd like you, Manish, to listen to Salman Rushdie and really comment on the point that he's making about how the freedom of speech is being violated.
If this country takes pride in being a free society, it needs to behave like a free society, you know, and that means it needs to protect those people who express their ideas freely, instead of blaming them, which is what all too often happens, is that, you know, the police will say it's, you know, like it's up to the Jaipur people to not offend anybody. Well, no, it isn't, because art and literature has always expressed ideas strongly, and sometimes that means that other people won't like that, you know, but the answer to that is, you know, read a different book, see a different movie.
Manish, you must answer that. If you don't like what a writer or an artist does, ignore it, protest about it, but why hold him to ransom?
Well, I absolutely agree with what Mr. Salman Rushdie said, that if you don't, or if you've heard that a particular movie, you know, offends your sensibilities, you obviously always have the option of not seeing it. If you think that a particular book is not something which you would like to read, or it does not fall within the broad parameters of your discerning taste, you always have the option of to let it go and read another thing. But eventually, if you do feel, and that's why I think when the founding fathers of the Constitution cast each of the articles, you know, which deal with fundamental rights, you know, they balanced each of them in a manner whereby the equilibrium would be maintained. And the challenge in any democratic society, because ultimately no right is unfettered, but we try and interpret it as liberally as possible, so that the freedom of speech and expression can have its fullest play. No, that's not true, Manish.
The Congress is as guilty as other political parties of pandering to the mob. What happened just before the Uttar Pradesh elections, when Salman Rushdie was to go to the Jaipur Literary Festival, he wasn't allowed by the state government, which is run by the Congress party, to come there because you were concerned of the impact this would have on the vote banks. Each and every time, it's the concern about the vote bank that triumphs over the larger concern of the right to uphold free speech.
Well, I thought you talked about elections in UP and somebody not being allowed to go to Rajasthan. That's a bit of an oxymoron and a cop-out.
Well, explain why that happened.
Rajasthan was not going in for elections. He wasn't going to Uttar Pradesh.
Why don't you explain it as your chief minister? It's your government, Manish.
So therefore, the parallel that you are trying to draw is completely erroneous.
That's exactly what happened, Manish.
Your question is based on a wrong assumption, that there was some kind of a linkage between Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan.
Because after the UP elections got over, Manish, the same Salman Rushdie came to Delhi, went to Mumbai, nobody uttered a word. There wasn't a single person protesting.
So therefore, the conjecture that you're drawing may perhaps be erroneous to begin with. Maybe the Chief Minister of Rajasthan or the administration of Rajasthan, you know, had a set of circumstances which they had to deal with, you know, where they took a particular decision. But to extrapolate and link it to an Uttar Pradesh election, I think is completely wrong.
Rahul, if I may, you know, actually, Manish, I'd just like to narrow this down to the issue of law and order. Because every time that there is an assault on freedom of speech, governments across the political spectrum, you know, every political hue caves in under the idea that there's going to be a law and order situation. You think about Professor James Lane, you think about Deepa Mehta, you think about Hindu protests, Muslim protests, Christian protests, Dalit protests. Basically, it boils down to government saying that there's going to be a law and order situation, so we rather curb the artist than the protester. Now, will you accept that that at least across the board, not blaming Congress or BJP, across the board has been a political cop-out?
You see, let's understand that police forces across the country are at times rather thin on the ground. So therefore, when there is an apprehension that there may be a public protest, governments automatically tend to clamp down. And that's why in the Prakash Jha judgment, the Supreme Court very clearly said that if there is a film, and that's why I'm giving you the example of a film, which has been certified as being fit for exhibition, then the state cannot hide behind the subterfuge of law and order. In fact, they have to marshal all their resources to see that law and order is maintained. No, so on that there is complete agreement.
Manish, only that when there's will of government to side with something, governments prevail. So, you know, when you're saying police is thin on the ground, when you want to stop a protest, governments are able to stop a protest. So simple point being that when people want to protest, it should be non-violent. If they threaten violence, it is they who should be penalized, not the artists across the
country. I think that's a fair point that you make, that if at all there are, and that's why, which brings me back to my earlier point, that if you would have robust legal remedies available on the statute, then the tendency of people to come onto the streets will also decrease. In fact, a lot of things come onto the streets because people feel that if they go and access the judicial system, it may take them 20 years.
This bogey of law and order is heard often. That lady has a very interesting question. Please go on.
On what evidences does the government anticipate the riots for banning events, because there might not be riots also? So on what evidences does the government anticipate it?
Well, that's a fair question as to how do you make this determination about events which have to happen in the future. And the simple answer to that is, you know, based upon the feedback that you receive. Some of that feedback is available in the public space. Some of that is articulated in newspapers, across television media and various other media. And some of it is accessed, you know, through the intelligence structures.
Ma'am.
Manish, let me introduce you myself. I am Kathak dancer, Uma Sharma, and I want to ask you something to defend the performing artists such as singers, musicians and dancers. Lately we have seen a number of things happening. Those who are performing, singing or dancing, so the things are developing like they shouldn't do this, they should do this. I think the freedom of creativity to artists should be maintained. That's what I feel, of course, but we need the protection, and we need that government should immediately take such action on creative artists, whether they are singers, musicians and dancers. Because let me tell you one thing, I have been dancing and doing number of things. Same time I do Krishna, same time I do Ghalib, but nobody stopped me. But now I see things, they develop. No one comes once they say, yes, we will do this, but they don't do it.
That's a very important point.
And freedom of creativity to the performing artists. I want
and it's getting worse.
Well, I think you make a fair point. You see, this is the paradox of the short fuse. On one hand, you have a proliferation of instruments of information dissemination, which allow all of us to put our opinions, to put our views out in the public space. On the other hand, you have intolerance, you know, which is growing on a daily basis. So therefore, that is why I call this the paradox of the short fuse. And as India goes forth into the next decade of its development, this is going to become the most critical challenge as to how do we imbibe more tolerance amongst our people,
but I don't agree with that,
we
Manish.
start respecting the views of each other.
Oh, I don't agree with that at all. I don't think necessarily intolerance is going. The government is just allowing the mob and the fringe to hold the nation to ransom. Even during Pandit Nehru's time, there would be opponents. That's what the lady said.
Earlier, I am telling you one thing that I wanted to perform, and somebody remarked that Uma is making this Ghalib, by bringing the Ghalib's couplet, making a Kothe Ka Naach. At that time, Nurul Hasan ji was there. as the Department of Culture Education Minister, I was sort of encouraged.
No one standing up for the right of the artist.
Nobody did anything to me. Now, very lately, we see all these things and nobody comes to protect.
That's an important point.
Well, I think the one thing that we've noticed, over all these controversies is that the silent majority is increasingly speaking up. In fact, you've had more voices coming out and condemning those people who tried to obstruct, who tried to ban, who tried to prevent, in order to ostracize them. So therefore, when there is a body of opinion in the middle which also becomes vocal and starts standing up for their rights, automatically you have an insulation and a protection insofar as creative freedoms are concerned.
I want to take a question from one person who's being hounded and victimized the most when it comes to someone saying something and action being taken against Sanjoy Roy, who organizes the Jaipur Lit Fest. Manish is smiling. Sanjoy.
Sanjoy is a friend.
Hi Manish, Sanjoy Roy. Just to check, given the situation over the last few weeks, if not last few years, how does government view the situation whereby an individual or a group of people can disrupt or hijack the agenda of a nation? What is government's reaction to this? I mean, how is it that we never hear government's viewpoint or government stand on this particular issue?
Well, I think government's viewpoint is always very clear. Government has consistently stood up for the right of people to organize themselves without fear or favor. So therefore, if at all there are any curbs which are placed on any event being held or any festival being organized or the festival or the content of the festival, then obviously, government must be held to account. But yes, if during the course of the festival, there unfortunately at times is an unseemly controversy and the protagonists actually blame the disseminators for really misinterpreting and putting their views out in the public space, I think the disseminators also need to reflect about their sense of responsibility. So therefore, if you try and make responsibility a one-way street and think that it is only government's responsibility, then I'm afraid it is not going to work. Okay. Every stakeholder has to weigh in equally into the process.
Well, I do agree with the argument that we're all equal stakeholders, but there is the recent ban on the Kashmiri girl band. Now, when the government sides with ban, whether it is Salman Rushdie being banned from the Jaipur Literature Festival or any such sort of, when you're saying you're circumscribing the freedom of speech, aren't you also in a way propagating a culture of intolerance in the country, because it's going to encourage fringe groups to come out and protest and ban things that they don't like?
It becomes a cottage industry, a flourishing cottage industry.
You've raised two questions. The first of all with regard to the band in Kashmir, and the encouraging thing or the silver lining in this otherwise very ominous controversy, according to me, has been the broad support which these girls received from across the political spectrum in Jammu and Kashmir also. And when you talk about circumscribing the freedom of speech and expression and therefore contributing to a culture of intolerance, I think possibly the underlying assumption of your question is erroneous, if I may put it very respectfully, because for the simple reason that we are not talking about circumscribing anybody's freedom of speech or expression. All that we are saying is that it should be accompanied by reasonable and robust remedies.
No, but why is it that when an artist expresses himself, or young girls express themselves like the girls in Kashmir or the Facebook girls in Palghar, they have the law come down on them? But when an Asuddin Owaisi or a Praveen Togadia make their hate speech, the people who are actually trying to divide society, polarize it, the government freezes, doesn't move. Till the time there's sustained media pressure, the government refuses to lodge an FIR, let alone arrest these people. The people who need to be acted against, the government doesn't want to touch them.
Well, you are entitled to absolutely pat yourself in the back and, pay compliments to the pressure which you generate. And I very, very happily would take that point. But eventually, when it comes to the question of hate speech, I think governments have not been found wanting, for the simple reason that hate speech is something so abominable and
That's
so
not true,
obnoxious.
Manish. You make these points which are not factually correct. The government didn't move against Asuddin Owaisi.
Well, in the sense
in the case of Praveen Togadia, till the time headlines put out that story, carried it through and through, the government refused to move.
Your difficulty is that you want justice to be meted out like instant coffee. It does not work in that manner. After all, if an offence is committed, there is a first information report which is registered. There is an investigation process which has to be gone through before further legal steps can be taken. I mean, you cannot just say, hey, presto, clap your hands and expect people to be put behind bars. That is promoting the culture of intolerance.
Rahul, there were two things you said, Manish, which are a bit disappointing. One is that you said there is a growing culture of intolerance. I think that one is out of step with time, because if you look at any protests, any organized protests, particularly to do with freedom of speech, you'll find that there are 20 or 30 people that turn up, whether it is to burn an exhibition or take down a poster or film poster. And basically, the governments are bending to the loudest voice rather than what should be the principle of it. Number two, you just said that there is a large majority now that are speaking up, and so the middle, who want freedom of speech or want a kind of middle position, are being heard, and so governments are now beginning to respond to that. I find that disappointing, Manish, because governments are elected to uphold some constitutional principles. Are you telling me that tomorrow, if there's a huge communal wave in this country, or there's a big bigoted wave in this country, that governments are going to just respond to that they're not going to show spine, they're not going to stand up for principles? You're going to only respond to public mood?
I think, Shoma, again, you need to see this question in a slightly larger remit. If you look at the ethos of India going over 3 decades, you would find the kind of permissiveness, the kind of liberalism which we saw in the 80s or even in the 90s, notwithstanding some of the sharper sectarian movements that we had during that point in time. There was still a greater tolerance for various manifestations of the liberal arts. And I may be wrong, but this is completely an individual assessment, but I find those spaces shrinking, and that is what bothers me. And that is why when I said that it is good that the silent majority has also started speaking out and saying that this noisy minority, does not represent us, or it does not represent the entire social spectrum, it not only strengthens the confidence of those people who stand for those values, but reinforces our constitutional ethos on a daily basis.
At town hall, people have heard Narendra Modi speak. They've also heard Rahul Gandhi speak. We've got Manish Tewari. We've got some young people who've got questions on this big duel between Rahul and Narendra Modi. Go ahead.
My question is, has Rahul Gandhi done any substantial work for the country till now?
Well, I think you really need to go and make a very objective assessment about the work which Mr. Gandhi has done, both as a member of parliament in his constituency.
He barely goes to parliament. His attendance is amongst the poorest.
Which is his fundamental remit, as well as the work that he has done as the General Secretary of the Indian National Congress, tasked with the responsibility of rejuvenating the mass organization. So therefore, those were the 2 fundamental responsibilities that he had. And over the past 9 years that he's been in Parliament, and he's been General Secretary and now Vice President of the Indian National Congress, he's delivered on both those remits.
Manish, let's look at some facts. Rahul Gandhi's attendance record in Parliament is amongst the poorest. He's barely asked any questions, unlike all other MPs who, like yourself before you became a minister, who asked questions. He's asked amongst the fewest questions. He's made amongst the fewest speeches. This young person has a valid concern when he wonders why should this person be considered India's future leader when he hasn't done anything which instills confidence in young India.
Rahul, there is a difference between volubility and work. And the distinction between volubility and work is that there are people who concentrate on substantive improvement in the quality of life of their people, in their constituencies, as well as discharge the work which has been given to them by the party. And in Parliament, it is as important to sit and listen, to imbibe, to absorb, to learn, as it is to get up and speak.
But his attendance record is also very poor, so it's not as if he's spending a lot of time listening either.
Please do not go by attendance record in terms of the register signed, because more often than not, you have a lot of members of Parliament who do not sign the attendance register. In my 3 years or 3.5 years in Parliament, I can recollect ad nauseum instances where between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, when some of the more substantive debates go on, and when attendance is thin, one of the regular attendees of those debates has been Mr. Rahul Gandhi. So therefore, you see, to extrapolate on the basis of hyperbole and come to judgments, I think is completely incorrect.
Okay, that lady wants to ask us a question, the one in the black sweater.
I want to ask, why is it so important for the Congress party to have Rahul Gandhi as its vice president, even though he has failed time and time again? I mean, he was at the head of the UP elections. He failed in Gujarat elections again. So why is there such a big frenzy over his becoming the vice president, even though there is no such substantial contribution of his to the country?
Well, it is not that Mr. Rahul Gandhi wanted to become Vice President of the Indian National Congress. It is the cadres and the activists of the Indian National Congress who wanted that he should take on a greater role. So therefore, in deference to the wishes of the cadre, and there was a body of opinion across the length and breadth of this country which wanted that he should have a role which was bigger than the one he was performing in terms of looking after the mass organizations. And then the examples which are being cited are all examples of state level elections where the imperatives are different. Let's also not forget the fact that it is in the same Uttar Pradesh that Congress got 21 members of Parliament. It is the same country where the UPA increased its numbers from 140 to 206, and one of the principal campaigners was Mr. Rahul Gandhi.
But so Congress party has been projecting Rahul as the leader of the youth. But then when the youth of India is on the streets, let's say in the times of the Lokpal bill and then recently this gang rape case, why does he never come out and speak to them? Never have a conversation with them?
Well, I think there is a difference between the kind of dialogue which certain people want to thrust onto you and the kind of dialogue which you want to have. On both those occasions, whether it was the Lokpal bill or it was the unfortunate incident which led to the outrage, Mr. Rahul Gandhi constructively engaged with sections of young people, not only those who came to meet him, but he went out of the way, walked the extra mile to talk to them. The question, unfortunately, is misdirected, because on both those occasions, whether it was the Lokpal bill or it was the outrage after this unfortunate incident, he actually spoke to people, understood their concerns, took them on board, and that is why you've had a Lokpal bill which after 64 years is now finally seeing the light of the day, and you have an ordinance which has tightened the laws with regard to protection and safety of women more than ever before. So therefore you have two substantive...
Whenever the protests are on, he never comes out and says something.
Ultimately, the protests are towards a certain end. And what was the end? The end was that people wanted to see the institution of Lokpal being created. B, there was a feeling that the laws are not adequate with regard to the safety and security of women. Now, on both those counts, you've had substantive movement. Substantive movement in terms of a Lokpal bill, which hopefully, if the opposition cooperates, will get passed in this session of Parliament, and an ordinance which has toughened the laws with regard to crimes against women more than ever before.
His question about why Rahul didn't meet still remains unanswered. Is it disconcerting for you, Manish, that so many young people, and all of them don't have political affiliations, they're college students, young working professionals, seem not to have any confidence in your big hope? He's the big hope for the Congress party, and all of them wonder, we work hard to make a mark for ourselves. Rahul's got what he's got because of the position that he enjoyed as a consequence of his birth. He's not done anything to deserve to get there. and he doesn't instill much confidence in this young audience.
Well, in the sense that people are perfectly entitled to ask questions, but the assumptions that you make with regard to birth, let me tell you something very clearly. You may have a first mover advantage if you come from a political family, but eventually you are judged by the people on the basis of your performance. And here, Mr. Gandhi is not a first-time MP. You know, this is his second time in Parliament, and as I pointed out earlier, he has come back with a higher majority than he did in 2004. And if he would not have worked, you know, in the mass organizations, rejuvenated them, opened the doors to younger people to come in, democratize the ethos of those organizations, you wouldn't have had this groundswell of opinion within the Congress and outside asking for him to step up and take a bigger role.
I'm from SRCC. Narendra Modi came to our college. He gave a lecture on modern business plans. He never talked about anything that he's gonna be contesting as a prime minister. So why is there a lot of controversy on him? Rahul Gandhi can go to UP, he can deliver political speeches. Why can't Narendra Modi? He also has a right to speech.
Why was the Congress worker protesting outside SRC?
Rahul Gandhi has a right to speak.
Let's understand something very clearly, that there are a lot of people who do not agree with the developmental model which the Chief Minister of Gujarat has been propagating. It's a flawed model. It is based upon an erroneous concept of social equity, and therefore, you know, needs to be critiqued. And in terms of the protest, let's not forget the fact that the gentleman in question is an increasingly is a polarizing personality. There are a lot of people who have very strong views about his role in the program of 2002. So therefore, when you talk about the freedom of speech and expression, I think they are also entitled to their freedom of speech and expression to come out and protest against a person whom they don't like. People who came and protested are also students of the same university.
So, but they came around the road, they say SRCC this, SRCC that. Why a college is being blotted being a political event? Why a college is being blotted?
I think that's a question which you need to ask your peers as to why were they so agitated? You know, why were they so angry? And therefore, if you have a right to invite somebody, you know, I think other people have a right to protest peacefully.
Okay, go on.
So I'm gonna drop the political parallel, but I'm a student of political campaigning. I've studied campaign politics, and I believe that communication is the most powerful tool that politicians have. Why do I not know what Rahul Gandhi thinks about n number of issues that the people of this country face? Why is it that he has to be coaxed to step out and reach out to people? Why don't we ever hear from the man himself?
Well, I think the man himself spoke at length in Jaipur. He expressed his opinion on a variety of issues. He articulated upon them at length. And if you would take the trouble of really visiting his website, where he regularly puts out his points of view, you would possibly find the answer to a lot of your questions.
So I totally agree with you, but you know, while I can go access the internet and read off his website, I don't think a lot of other people in this country can. They want to know what the man has to say.
Well, you would be surprised. You would be surprised at the extent of broadband penetration and the access which people have to instruments of being able to access both information and knowledge. So be rest assured that insofar as you are concerned, your curiosity will be satiated by going onto the website. The rest of them, the rest of them broadly understand and instinctively know and recognize a leader when they see one.
If you say that, like, you know, the feedback mechanism exists and all, those are assertions, right? Why do we need to come down the streets? Why is the feedback mechanism between the government and the people being, you know, water cannon on the streets, and why is that the instance where the government actually goes and listens? And why not before that?
Well, I think again, if you were to update your knowledge concurrently, it may just be worth your while. Even before this unfortunate incident took place, the Criminal Amendment Bill 2012 was already under consideration in the Standing Committee. A lot of the measures which have been incorporated in the ordinance have actually been taken from that Criminal Amendment Bill, So it is not that before this unfortunate incident, the laws were not being updated.
So why the state of, let's say, even your Doordarshan channel, right? Why is it so abysmally sad and like sorrowful that you don't even want to look at that channel, right? Like,
well, there's
let that feedback mechanism exist at the end of the day.
There is a difference between sensationalism and news. And what Doordarshan delivers is hard news and not views.
Do you think Doordarshan is news? I mean, what does the audience think of it? That gentleman over there also has a question on Doordarshan. Yes.
I'm sure that even you would have never watched Doordarshan.
You will be surprised. You will be surprised. We grew up watching Doordarshan, and let me tell you,
that was before TV news channels came in.
if you were to go on to Doordarshan between 8 and 10 these days, and then give me a feedback on DD News, you would possibly change your opinion. It would be just worth your while to go and watch it for one day, and then you'll know the difference between news and views.
No, but the issue is that if I don't watch Doordarshan, none of these people watch Doordarshan, this is not our fault or anybody's fault. So, I mean, since you represent...
That's a choice that you make. I'm not dictating the choice.
Since you represent information broadcasting, so what do you think of like upgrading this thing?
Well, you see, the saying is there is always room for improvement, and that is why, there are a broad series of measures which have been initiated across the board. And I do hope that this answer does not get cut out in the editing, because I'm trying to promote, what is my property or what is the government property at the moment. Much to the detriment of the competition. But it'll be worth your while going and watching 8 to 10 on DD News these days.
I'm glad no one's watching, and I'm glad everybody's watching Right to be Heard. Okay. Go on.
I was there at the speech given by Mr. Modi, so I could see the connect that he has with the crowd. I mean, everything that he said regarding Gujarat, the Gujarat model, as successful as it has been till now, including their agriculture, services sectors. So I just want to know, like, would Rahul Gandhi really step out and really do something for the nation on those lines as well? Because I think Modi has been there and done that, and it still remains for the Gandhi.
He has a proven track record.
Well, I do hope that Mr. Rahul Gandhi or anybody in the Congress never ever thinks of doing what the Chief Minister of Gujarat has done to that state. See, the fundamental prerequisite of development is social equity. And unfortunately, that social equity is completely missing in the context of Gujarat. Why is it that we heard such a long homily on development and not a word on the Gujarat program? After all, that most horrific incident which went on for 3 months, happened on his watch as Chief Minister. Even today as we speak, Gujarat is number 6 insofar as GSDP is concerned. Gujarat lags behind all the other progressive states on parameters of human development. Insofar as translation of the memorandums of understandings signed during Vibrant Gujarat, even if you go to the Gujarat government's own website, the record is abysmal. So that is what I'm trying to say.
The question
that the developmental model that he's trying to market is a complete myth. It is just hot air and nothing else.
No, but understand where the question comes from. I think what everybody is trying to convey to you is that Modi's done something. You may like it, you may dislike it, maybe number 5, number 6. Rahul's done nothing in comparison. For people to know what his track record is, he has no track record.
The whole comparison that you're making is absolutely incorrect. The fact is that if at all there is any comparison which has to be made, the comparison should be made between the performance of the UPA government over the past 9 years. And there have been concrete achievements which have been made in the last 9 years. So therefore, this mythical comparison which is being trying to be drawn, and I can go on chapter and verse about the UPA story, qua the NDA story, and as to how mythical the whole Gujarat story is. That is why, since all of you are young people sitting here, I would ask you and request you to go into the hard numbers, sift the truth from the fiction, and then make up your mind.
You're saying it's a marketing myth. Very clearly from the audience, it seems it's a successful marketing myth.
Don't you feel that in today's day and scenario, all the politicians who are going ahead with the campaigns is basically to demean the other opposition party? Rather than building upon your positives, it's more of the negativity that we hear about Modi doing this bad or that bad. Why don't we hear that
this is what we want to propagate and this is what we'd really like to see. Why isn't there more focus on the positives rather than the negatives of the opposition party?
Well, I think given the nature of discourse, it is always unfortunately a combination of the good, the bad and the ugly. And unfortunately, I tend to agree with you, the good at times gets subsumed by the bad and the ugly. But if you really look at it, the rights-based structure which the UPA has put in place over the last 8 or 9 years is something which is truly evolutionary in its import. Nowhere in the world for a population of 1.2 billion people have basic rights, access to information, access to education, access to food, access to other basic services being guaranteed as a legal right. It has happened in no democracy anywhere in the world.
You said we evaluate the country, the government on 5 bases. I wanted to know if you evaluate the government on the basis of corruption. There have been numerous scams during the UPA, the UPA government. So
Again, I think you need to sift fact from fiction. You're right. There
Manish
have
is a
been.
good lawyer. He's got smart answers for everything.
So you need to understand that there are allegations, and eventually those allegations have to be adjudicated in a court of law. There are trials which are undergoing as we speak, and those trials need to reach a conclusion. But the important thing that you need to keep in mind, unlike some of our predecessors who tried to sweep everybody everything under the carpet, who ran media organizations into the ground, bankrupted them when they had the temerity to expose what was uncomfortable for them. UPA has been absolutely upfront. Wherever there was even a whiff of an aberration, we have allowed the law to take its own course. So therefore, if people are convicted, if people have done wrong, they should be convicted and they should be ostracized. But one thing that you need to keep in mind is, because we had the conviction of courage and the courage of conviction, we allowed the legal processes to go through unfettered, unhindered, and without any influence, fear or favor.
Okay, I'm going to let that be the last word. One of the young members of the audience said there's a big gap between government and the people. I'm glad that this show is serving as a bridge and serving as the right for people to be heard. Minister, you came here, you joined us, you heard this young audience. They had some nice things to say, some not so nice things to say. You answered their questions. Thank you so much. Thank you all for participating in the Right to be Heard program. We'll be back same time next week with another burning issue, more questions that need to be answered, another person on that hot seat. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you. Thanks, Rahul.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.